Hey there, everybody, and today on the Plant Path, we're going to be continuing on talking a little bit more about astrology and herbalism and how these fit together. And I want to talk about today this concept of astral polarities and their relationship to organ systems. One of the things that really struck me when I first started getting into studying medical astrology in its relationship to herbal medicine was all of the insights that it started to bring to me in regards to seeing connections in how the body works in ways that aren't always readily apparent, I suppose, on the surface, or perhaps seeing things that are connected in the body that are obvious, but the way that it relates to the pattern of astrology is just not happenstance, that it's a little too accurate and precise for there not to be something profound going on here. This is something that I've always been interested in, as I am a little bit of a nerd for patterns. And I think this is one of the things that I appreciate about traditions of medicine that have a little bit of a different understanding of, I guess, anatomy and physiology than modern science, than the modern scientific approach. For example, how in Ayurveda, they see that the Vata dosha connects the lungs and the colon and the nervous system. That's pretty profound. There's a lot of very interesting dynamics there in terms of, when you're stressed and anxious and your Vata is high, one of the best ways to calm down is take a deep breath. That's the lung nervous system connection. The lungs and the colon and the mind. Anyone that's ever felt constipated knows that constipation in your bowel also can constipate your mind. It's like really, really hard to concentrate sometimes when you experience constipation. I've only been constipated once in my life, and I felt like my brain was filled with cotton balls. Like I could not think clearly. I couldn't concentrate. I was just felt spaced and tired. And I was like, and then I remembered, that's Vata. Like there's a Vata blockage here that's going on. And it's just very, very interesting. So I like systems that allow you to see interconnections between things that maybe on a strictly scientific understanding of anatomy and physiology doesn't really show. So everything in astrology exists in interconnection with each other, right? Nothing really exists in isolation. This is clear, I think, by virtue that the prime symbol is a circle. The chart is a circle, and everything has angular relationships and different types of communication amongst one another. And one of the big patterns that I really enjoy and I'm continuing to learn from all the time is this concept that I had learned from Judith Hill, and my good buddy Tyler also talks about this too. Tyler Penor from the School of Living Astrology, about how really there's 6 archetypes, right? Just in oppositions, 6 sets of opposites, which is what forms our 12 signs of the Zodiac. But learning them by opposition and in relationship to one another, first of all, makes learning astrology a lot easier. Second of all, it lends a whole bunch of insights into the nature of the signs by studying their opposite. And in terms of medical astrology, this lends some very interesting insights into the underlying structure of the body and how these archetypal forces influence the body, as well as the connection between the body and the psyche. So I always like to consider that we can't really understand the nature of a sign without understanding its opposite, because they are, in a sense, even though they're farthest apart, they're in a sense inseparable, and they represent the spectrum of a singular archetype, is the way that I think of it. So understanding these oppositional patterns gives us some very interesting perspectives in terms of understanding the body, which as an herbalist, this is one of our chief focuses is we need to understand how the body functions, how it's put together. We need to understand the interconnections that it has, because the body is very complex. Human beings are complex. We have very complex conditions in this modern world, complex health problems. And the more we have systems that help us understand and address that complexity, the more efficient and effective our practice will be. So this was a game changer. So I wanted, for me at least, hopefully it can be for you too. Now, of course, there's a lot more depth one could go into on these sign polarities. There's a lot of nuance and dynamic, but I wanted to run through the 6 of them here to just give you a high-level overview so you can get an understanding of the connections between these oppositions and how they actually form a functional system within the body. So yes, signs govern areas of the body, parts of the body, but it is the axes that really form functional systems that are very important to consider. And this also, understanding these axes can be really, really helpful in navigating the dynamic that I hear a lot of students bring to me a lot, which is, oh, this person has this problem in this organ system. And I went and looked at that area in their chart and there's like nothing going on there. Like it's empty. There's no planet there in the sign or in the house, and there's nothing major happening. Like, what's up with that? So this can help clarify that point. So anyways, without further ado, let's dig in to our 6 axes. So let's talk about the Aries-Libra axis. So in the body, and I'm going to speak of this more physiologically. There's obviously lots of things in regards to the psyche that could be discussed here as well. I'm just going to focus on the physical side for today. So the acid-alkaline balance is a major thing here with the Aries-Libra axis. So Aries tends to govern the head, and then Libra governs the kidneys. So one of the things that's interesting, Aries also has association to the adrenal glands. And so one of the ways that I like to think of it, well, Libra governs the kidney, and then Aries governs the adrenal, which sit right on top of the kidneys. So that's a pretty interesting relationship there. And then we have this concept of, well, the adrenals don't exist in isolation with one another. They are they're intricately interwoven into a greater axis of endocrine function, what we typically refer to as the HPA axis, or the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. Of course, the hypothalamus and the pituitary are in your brain, in the head, which relates to Aries. But what happens when that axis becomes overstimulated, essentially the stress response, it tends to drain your vitality. As anyone that's been chronically stressed for a long period of time knows, it drains your vitality. And the concept of kidney in Chinese medicine is much more than just filtering and producing urine. It has to do with holding the primal fire and the primal waters of the body. It holds your jing, it's your vital essence, basically, is in the kidneys. And when you live a really fast-paced stress lifestyle, don't sleep well, all the stuff that we know we shouldn't do but do, we drain our vitality. And so this is like this excess of Aries, this excess HPA axis can create a deficiency in Libra, in the kidneys. And there's 2 of them, balance, fire and water, kidney yin, kidney yang, can become deficient when that stress response is overactivated. So there's this dynamic between the glandular and the hormonal system, as well as some of the vitality that can be contained within the kidneys. Now, the kidneys in a medical astrology perspective usually aren't really understood or discussed in that context, the way they're discussed in traditional Chinese medicine. And I try not to draw too many correlations with TCM just because it is a very distinct kind of entity on its own. But this connection for me is a little too clear and perfect as an example. And I do believe that there is a good correlation there between the nature of Libra as the balancing force, the scales, and the dynamic of kidney yin, kidney yang, primal fire, primal water, and our vitality. Next would be Taurus-Scorpio. So this is a really fun one. This is one where I was like, wow, these connections are kind of profound. So Taurus is the ears, the lower jaw, and the throat. Scorpio is the lower pelvic region. So that typically includes the bladder, that includes the colon, and that includes the reproductive system. And so the interesting connection there would be, well, for one, it has a lot to do with the excretory system. I mean, that's what Scorpio is, right? It's excreting, it's urination, it's defecation, it's like eliminating things from the body. Taurus is intake. So Taurus is taking things in the form of food and drink, and Scorpio is eliminating those things, the waste products. So nourishment and waste is part of this axis. The other interesting dynamic is puberty. What happens in puberty? Well, the voice changes, Taurus, and the reproductive system matures, Scorpio. So I thought that was a very interesting correlation there. When I learned that, I was like, oh, of course, that makes so much sense. That axis is becoming activated during puberty. I also think this axis is a good place for insight in regards to understanding what we eat, what foods are appropriate for our unique constitution, and how that affects our excretion and especially bowel health. So this axis is a really good thing to consider for people that have, potentially problems with the large intestine, such as, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, things like that. The next axis is Gemini and Sagittarius. So Gemini relates to the lungs. It's like it's the twins. So as we move down from Aries, the top of the head, to Pisces, the bottom of the feet, we're progressively moving down the body. So you got Aries, Taurus, and then Gemini is where everything splits and divides. That's why it's the twin. So it's the two lungs, the two arms, the two hands. And Gemini has a lot to do with our motor skills and movement, respiratory system, breathing, etc. Saturn is kind of the other side of that, the hips and the thighs. So again, it has a lot to do with movement. That's why Saturn has to do with travel, long distance travel, and has to do with the nervous system. So this axis has a lot to do with the nervous system, the voluntary nervous system. I would also say Sagittarius, along with its ruler Jupiter, has to do with arterial circulation. So with Gemini, you have breathing, and then with Sagittarius, you have the arterial circulation of bringing that oxygenated blood out through the rest of the system. So there's an aspect of, oxygenation oftentimes is correlated to Aquarius, but Sagittarius is what's actually picking up the oxygen at the lungs and then delivering it. So that's the Gemini-Sag axis. But the nervous system and this is kind of like what I was talking about earlier with Vata. These are both mutable signs, which is a Vata dynamic, another layer of connection, which I think is interesting. But we see that, with Gemini and Sagittarius is this voluntary control of the nervous system as controlled by our breath, by our breathing. That's the interesting thing about the aspect of respiration, is that it's both under the voluntary and involuntary aspects of the nervous system, meaning that you are breathing as long as you're alive. You're breathing, right? It just happens automatically. And yet you can control it. You can control your breath. And through the control of the breath, we can regulate the nervous system. This is why whenever someone's stressed out and anxious and nervous, a good friend will say, well, just take a deep breath, because we all know deep breathing calms the nerves. That's the Gemini-Sagittarius axis and a relationship between the respiratory and nervous systems. Well, if you're still here with me, I'm assuming that you have an interest in the synergy between medical astrology and clinical herbal medicine. So real quick, I just want to let you know about something big that's happening March 18th, 2025. We are going to be releasing our Astro Herbalism mini course. That's right, our annual mini course is happening here very soon. And this is a 100% free, in-depth 3-part workshop series where I outline in significant more depth and detail some of the fundamental principles and practices behind how to integrate the practice of medical astrology into your work with medicinal plants and people to bring about transformational levels of healing. So be sure to sign up for our newsletter list so you get the email to announce when we are opening this up. We'll also have a link for a waiting list if you want to be first in line to join me on March 18th, 2025 for the Astro Herbalism mini course. Just wanted to let you know of that. And with that, on with the lesson. Next axis is Cancer and Capricorn. So Cancer has everything to do with nourishment. So this is why Cancer governs the breasts, breast milk, which nourishes the fetus. Also has to do with the stomach, which is the first stop in the journey of digestion. And Capricorn has to do with the structural components of the body, predominantly bones, teeth, and the joints, especially the knees, but the joints as a whole would be under the dominion of Capricorn and Saturn. And so the polarity here is, in the stomach, we see them both as the juices of digestion being Cancer, and then the stomach is unique in that it has a very it has chemical and mechanical digestion, the churning, and it's that mechanical aspect of digestion I see as being the Capricorn or Saturnian part of it. It's like physical movement to break everything down. The other aspect in this axis that we see is in the joints. So you have joints are really interesting because you have all these different types of tissues coming together. So you have bone, you have tendon, ligament, cartilage. That's all Capricorn, Saturn. But then you have things like the bursa and the synovial fluids that lubricate and moisten and enable your joints to ultimately have mobility. If we were all bone and connective tissue, we would just be walking around all stiff and skeletal, like we wouldn't have fluidity in our movement. The fluidity in movement is Cancer. So there's this dynamic of the structural and mobile aspect of our physical body that is governed by the Cancer-Capricorn axis. It also has to do with, whereas Taurus is ingestion and Scorpio is excretion, like intake, outtake, Cancer-Capricorn is more the absorption, the initial digestion, and then like the first part of digestion in terms of in the stomach, and then Capricorn, Saturn being the ultimate deposition of nutrient into the bone, into the deepest, most dense structural part of the body. So again, they're ends of a spectrum here. So that's Cancer, Capricorn. I always found that one to be very interesting as well. I think all those aspects from the function of the joints. Oh yeah, the other one there is the teeth. So the teeth are Capricorn, and then the gums and the saliva and all of the gum tissue and the saliva is Cancer. So again, these two working together in these functional areas of the body. Next is Leo and Aquarius. So Leo governs the heart and the circulatory system, as well as has a lot to do with the spinal cord. And then Aquarius has to do with more peripheral circulation. We would say the capillary side of circulation, the capillary beds, and then the venous return side of circulation. So you have, again, two ends of a spectrum. Leo, the heart at the center, and then Aquarius, the far end of the circulatory system, being the capillary beds. Aquarius also has to do with, the way it was explained to me as like the quote electrical system. Now that can sometimes be thought of as the nervous system, but the way that I tend to think of it is if you think of the beating of the heart is beating. Well, the timing of that beating and the way the heart has to pump to move blood, the ventricles and the atria, and it kind of has to flow through it a certain way. If the heart doesn't beat like this, it's more spiralic to make sure it's moving everything through. That's controlled by the nodes. The sinoatrial node is an example. Those are little electrical impulses. That would be seen as the Aquarius part of it. Not to mention, all of that there's communication and electrical signaling between the peripheral circulatory system, out in the periphery, that is electric. There's electrical signaling that's happening with the heart as well that will dilate and contract certain aspects of arterial circulation. So for example, we just ate a meal. The liver has a whole bunch of stuff in it that needs to be processed. Well, there's going to be a signal from the liver to, hey, we need to dilate and open up the hepatic artery. So we're bringing fresh oxygenated blood to the liver in order for it to all be processed. That signaling, that communication, right, from the periphery of the capillary beds in the liver to the heart is going to reorder the distribution of the blood as the body needs. So that signaling, that electrical aspect is Aquarian in nature. And so I thought, I think all of this is interesting. I'm repeating myself, but sometimes when I hear something or even say something that is interesting, I like to comment on that because I think it's interesting. So anyways, okay, last one, Virgo and Pisces. I like to think of this one as really, really cool. So the Virgo, small intestine, liver, really the abdominal, kind of this whole abdominal cavity is Virgo. But if we get a little more specific, it would be the small intestine and the liver more specifically. Whereas Pisces tends to have to do with immunity and especially the lymphatics. So it's the fish, the sign of the fish, the water element. The lymphatics could be seen as like the inner ocean of the body, or really extracellular fluid can be seen as inner ocean, but the lymphatic system is definitely a major part of that too, in that it's the filter, it's the cleansing mechanism, and that's where a good portion of our immunity is. Now, one interesting facet of this is what's called the GALT, the gut-associated lymphatic tissue. Very Virgo Pisces, lymph in the intestines. And this lymphatic system is a really integral part of the immune system. There's a lot of immunity in the gut. There's a lot of communication that's happening between the gut and the brain, the gut and the liver. So that's another interesting thing would be, the gut-liver axis, the digestive immune axis. This, of course, is a major contributing factor when we consider things like intestinal epithelial membrane dysfunction or leaky gut syndrome, food intolerance, allergies, and the big one would be autoimmunity. The whole autoimmune pattern is very much so sympathetically related to the Pisces-Virgo axis. It makes a lot of sense. A lot of those patterns can be seen as stemming from the gut. not always, but often can stem from the gut. And the systemic inflammatory and systemic immune response that can ensue, Virgo being the gut, and then the systemic immunity being Pisces, is a interesting correlation there. So we would also see the neurological gut, so the neurological control of the digestive system. So there is some relationship to the nervous system with Virgo and Pisces as well. Though Sagittarius and Gemini tends to predominantly govern the nervous system, it's really that whole mutable cross is the nervous system as a whole. But I do think that there's some interesting insights in the commonality of autoimmunity and gut issues in this modern world that Virgo and Pisces can lend some insights into. So understanding these oppositions, these systems, helps us understand these various ends of the body and how they communicate and are governed by these archetypal forces. Again, studying these oppositions is really useful from a psychological and emotional perspective as well. We can go further into this. Now, this is just looking at oppositions. There are, as I said at the beginning, everything is communicating, everything is in relationship. And so there's other unique insights that we can glean from in the body based on the governance and rulership of areas of the body and looking at their relationships. So in the chart, so for example, we could look at the trines, which are 120 degree relationships. It creates equilateral triangle, which is typically seen as a symbol of harmony, equal sides, equal angles. Everything's harmonious. So those trines are always elemental similarities, elemental synergy. So you have your water trine, your air trine, your fire trine, and your earth trine. So the elements are the same. It's just difference in the mode of that element. So your water trine is, your mutable water in Pisces, your fixed water in Scorpio, your cardinal water in Cancer. Well, you can get a lot of interesting insights studying those trines, that trine pattern, and how those areas of the body interact and what type of system it governs. This is like super duper insightful into reading charts from a medical perspective. It's one thing I really like to do. You can also look at the nature of the squares, which is more modal synergy. So you have your cardinal cross, your fixed cross, and your mutable cross. The oppositions are a part of that, but the squares are going to be more where the conflicts can happen. So this is where miscommunications, so to speak, can happen in different parts of the body, or a problem in one area of the body can affect another part of the body. So I like to think of it as elemental conflict. So they're all of the same mode, but they're different elements. So you have, the cardinal earth, cardinal water, cardinal air, cardinal fire, and they are all in these states of tension, whether it's through opposition or through the 90 degree, which is the square. So that can lend a lot of insights more into some of the conflicts or problems, or how a problem over here can create a problem over there, which happens all the time. And it's sometimes very difficult to pinpoint where is the root cause of the problem and where do you focus your therapeutics. This lends really good insight into that, which brings me to the final thought that I wanted to share with you on this, which is the nature of the reflex. So everything is connected in the body and in the chart. Basically, what I just shared with you is a solution to the issue of, they have a problem in your kidneys, but I looked at Libra and there's nothing going on in Libra. There's nothing going on in the seventh house. There's where's all the Libra stuff? If they've got kidney problems, you would think there's all this stuff going on with the kidney areas of the chart. this is where reflex comes in. So this is why it's useful to understand these oppositions, because maybe you look at Libra and there's nothing going on there, but then you look over to Aries and it's like, oh, there's all kinds of stuff going on over there. It's the Aries stuff, rather than causing an Aries problem, is reflexing to Libra. This is very, very common. And this is a really good starting point to figuring out a solution to what is causing an issue within someone's body by using the chart as essentially an assessment tool to find out where the affliction is occurring and therefore how to correct it. So you look at typically with reflex, you look at the opposite sign, but as I mentioned, the squaring signs can also be a contributing factor, especially when there is some form of pathology, sickness, imbalance that's occurring. The square reflex can be useful as well. And there's one other that's a little more specific, and it more specifically applies to Mars, but that would be the quincunx, which is a 150-degree relationship. It's, and this is something I learned from my teacher, Judith Hill. She says that the Mars quincunx is one of probably the most important medical aspects to look for. And it's interesting when you think of the quincunx, the 150-degree relationship is the distance from the first house to the fifth house, or the rising to the fifth house, or to the sixth house rather. That's 150 degrees away. Well, the first house, or the ascendant, is our constitution. The sixth house is our, quote, house of health. It's also just the house of work and our daily, kind of how you live your daily life. And how you live your daily life is what affects your constitution, and your constitution affects how you live your daily life. And those two combine to create your state of health. And so it makes sense that 150 would have a stronger health implication. But according to Judith, that really most specifically applies to the nature of Mars. So hopefully you found this interesting. I find it fascinating, and I think it lends a lot of insights into the interconnectivity that occurs within the body, some of the profound insights that the astrological tradition has to offer us as herbalists in terms of knowing what's happening with the person, where the roots are, and where we can strategically administer our remedies to help people out, because that's what it's all about. It's just making sure we figure out what's going on and we know how to best help them. So thank you very much for making it to the end of this video. I do truly appreciate it. It helps more than you might know with the algorithms, especially on YouTube. If you have not liked and subscribed this video or this channel, please do so. It really helps support what we're doing and continuation of distributing free content to the herbal community. And if you have not done so yet, head on over to evolutionaryherbalism.com. Check out what we got going on over there. Lots more free material for you to peruse. I want to encourage you to join our email list so that you can get heads up for when we're opening enrollment for our courses, whether that be our free workshop series or our paid, more in-depth online program. So check it out over at evolutionaryherbalism.com. Hit the like, hit the subscribe. And with that, I just want to thank you again very, very much for taking the time out of your busy life to join me here on the plant path. And I want to wish you well on yours moving forward. And until the next one, take care and be well.